All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming back to another episode of Elections Daily's Blast from the Past. I'm Armin Thomas, and joining me is Harrison Lavelle. This is a show where we interview former members of Congress about their tenure. And today we have with us former Congressman Bart Gordon, who was a congressman from the 6th District of Tennessee from 1985 to 2011. Uh, Bart Gordon was previously the executive director of the Tennessee Democratic Party and was the chair of the House Science Committee for his last couple of years. So, Congressman Gordon, thank you very much for being with us today.
Sure, man. Glad to be with you.
All right, Harrison, you want to take it
Yeah,
away?
sure. So very honored to have you on, Congressman Gordon. So my first question for you today is, what inspired you to run for the House? And how did that inspiration continue to drive you throughout your tenure in Congress?
Well, as I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who was sort of what you would call, I guess, a local politician. He was on the local rather education board. He was a member of the local county commission. And it was through him that I saw his really commitment to the community. He helped start the rural electrification in Rutherford County, and he just was very committed to his community. And I think that sort of, flowed to me. And then when I was a senior in high school, I worked in a friend's congressional campaign, John Bragg. He was not successful, but that's when I realized that I thought Congress was the highest office that someone like me with no big family name, no money could achieve just by hard work. And so that was my goal. I was 18 years old. And for the next 17 years, that was my really sole goal through college and law school and other things. Fortunately, that worked out. And in 1984, I was elected. And it was a dream come true. And I love my term in Congress. And it really was a place that I could help my community. And it was fun to have the hundreds of open meetings and get to meet people across the district and what their concerns were and how I could help them. It just very rewarding.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so why don't I ask my first question? So, I believe back in 1992, that was the first time you had, a somewhat serious Republican opponent who is now, I believe, Senator Marsha Blackburn. So I was wondering, what was that race like? And, how did that race shape your relationship with now Senator Blackburn, then Congresswoman Blackburn in Congress?
Well, actually, Marsha did me a big favor. I did have both a serious Democratic and Republican opponent in '84 when I first ran, but as you pointed out, really was not much of an opponent since then. But in '92, Marsha was I think she was like a fashion coordinator for either Kane Sloan's or Castronauts, one of the department stores there in Nashville, and really did not have what you might call a political base. She was very smart. She was energetic and very committed, but didn't have, again, what you would call a political base. And she, almost beat me at that time. And it was my wake-up call as I was going through the campaign, to really see and understand that there was this anti-incumbency feeling that was built up. And I remember in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign, my pollster said, this is a tough race and you need to spend, these were his words, spend all the money you have in the bank to bury her. And I said, this is just the front end of the wave. 94 is going to be even tougher. And so I'm going to save all the money, that I can. And so we had a heads up, and we spent the next 2 years preparing. And in '94, I only won by a few hundred votes. And I'm sure that I would have lost if it hadn't been for Marsha's wake-up call. So I'm, grateful for her to have done that. And one thing that's sort of interesting, if you ever want to do a trivia, I don't think any other member, I'll say, who was the only member of Congress that served with 2 members at the same time that they had beaten in earlier congressional elections? Answer is Bart Gordon. In 1984, I beat Lincoln Davis in the Democratic primary. He later was elected from a different district, then beat Marsha in 92. She was elected from a different district. So at one time, all three of us were there in Congress together.
Nice. Harris, you want to go?
Interesting. Yeah, sure. So my second question for you actually pertains to 2010 when you decided to retire. And my question is, did you ever consider running for re-election in 2010? And if so, how would you have attempted to counter the Republican campaign message that swept the nation that year and resulted in many flips and countless House races against the Democrats?
Well, I had a pretty good antenna. In 1994, there were, I think, 36 Democratic members of Congress that got beaten. 18 retired because they knew, that things were coming along. And I felt that same kind of wave coming in 2010. And it's debatable. I think that I would have been reelected. Most folks, I think, would agree with that simply because of the strong commitment that I had from the district and all the open meetings. However, I realized, just like in 94, the Democrats were going to lose the majority. And it wasn't that bad in 94 because, I was a junior member. But in 2010, I was a committee chairman. I was a senior member of Energy Commerce. I was passing legislation. I was really, in many ways, one of the major movers in Congress. And I didn't want to then go from that to just the ranking member or just, somebody throwing rocks. That was not the way I am. I wanted to be something constructive. So I didn't want to go to the minority. And it was, I love what I did, but it was time to move on.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very well thought out answer. Yeah. So I want to ask you now. So as the chair of the House Science Committee, you were a leading promoter of the space program and NASA. So with your experience and expertise in this field, what is your view on recent, policy adjustments that have been made in space, especially, the new Space Force that's now a thing?
In all honesty, Armin, I have not followed that all that closely, although I think it is inevitable that space will be a new frontier in, I hate to say war, but conflicts, and certainly in our national defense. Congressman Jim Cooper from Nashville played a major role in I think the legislation around the Space Force, and I think he will continue to. I trust him. I trust his judgment, and I think that that is probably moving in a good direction. And in terms of the space program in general and NASA, had been a debate about, do you go directly to Mars or do you go back to the moon? It'd been a few decades since we were at the moon, but a lot of folks would say, been there, done that. Let's go to the moon. Go to Mars directly. It'll be cheaper. The Trump administration decided to go back to the moon. I think that was the right decision for a couple of reasons. One, it was inevitable that other nations were going to go there in the next few years, and we would not have wanted them to have had a base and we not have a base. Plus, it's going to be enormously expensive and time consuming to get to Mars. And I don't think the public was ready to spend that kind of money and wait that long. So I think going to the moon for it, that base itself, and then launching to Mars later is a better thing. Although I do think the Trump administration had a very unrealistic time frame on it. But we still need to get back, have a base there before any other country does.
Good. Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask I have a final question for you, and it pertains to the work you've done since leaving Congress. So I was wondering, what work have you focused on specifically since leaving Congress, and how has it allowed you to fulfill any of the goals you may have had during your time in the House on things that you may not have been able to accomplish during your tenure?
Well, I was someone that thought that the transatlantic relationship was very important, both for national security and economic security. And so I was a member of something called the NATO Parliamentary Assembly while in Congress. I was a member of the US-EU Parliamentary Dialogue. And so now I am the Director General of something called the Transatlantic Business Council, which is, we're trying to bring really the US and the European economies together, which would be by far the largest in the world, to try to develop, more common standards and recognition so that it will make us sort of the leader in the world, and quite frankly, not China, that is trying to take us on in terms of economic dominance, but doing it in what I think is unfair ways. They're trying to steal our intellectual property rather than develop their own. They're trying to use both, I won't say slave labor, but they're certainly use forced labor to keep wages down. And if we're going to keep our standard of living higher, then we need to have those higher type of standards. Right now in the world, I should know, there are about 6 billion people. Half of those make less than $2 a day. And so, you're able to either compete on low wages or you're able to compete on higher efficiencies and technology. I want to have higher wages and have us compete on a higher scale. Well, and also I'm on the board of directors for the Former Members of Congress Association. It's an opportunity for me to work with the former members. We have a lot of programs on civility. We have something called Congress to Campus, where we take a Democrat and Republican and we go to various college campuses to discuss what we did and demonstrate, really, it's almost post-Congress, how Democrats and Republicans can work together to get things done. And both through that and through some other things, I'm working, I had some legislation at the end of my Congress to set up an office of Congress at the European Parliament. They've done that here. European Parliament has an office in Washington, as well as the European Commission. And so now I'm working with the local groups to see if we can encourage Congress to have a beachhead of an office there in Brussels. And the European Parliament has offered at no cost to allow us to have office space. I think we need to have that better communication. We're seeing it now. If we have divergence on technology standards or on technology taxes, it's just not going to be good. So we should be talking together. If we decide to go different ways, fine, but we need to discuss it first.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Armin, do you have your final question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Congressman Gordon, you come from a very rural and conservative district, but you do follow in the footsteps of climate luminaries like Al Gore, and you have worked with liberal members of Congress like Ed Markey on various pieces of energy and climate policy. So, from your experience, because a lot of people don't usually put rural voters and, climate change awareness in the same sentence, especially where I come from. From your experience, what is the best way to sell effective climate policy to rural voters and to conservative voters in general?
Well, when I was chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, I passed, I think it was 151 bills and resolutions. All of those were bipartisan, and many of those dealt with climate change. But I didn't really talk about climate change. At that time, I talked about energy independence. And so we were able, so a part of it is language, and we were able to talk about it that way. And you say that rural folks don't understand climate change. Well, farmers really do. Farmers are on the front end of seeing how things are changing. And I think there is a movement going on now. Democrats, as you know, I think pretty uniformly recognize that climate change is real and is a threat. Many Republicans don't want to say that man activities have anything to do with it, but they are starting now to at least say that climate change is real. And so I don't want to have to debate them about, again, whether it's human activities or not. As long as they believe climate change is real and we should do something about it, then fine. Let's deal with those things that we can agree upon. And also what I'm seeing now is that within the business community, there is a recognition that, again, climate change is real, climate change is a threat. And they, for two reasons, want to be involved. One, because they need some type of certainty. If you're going to deal with climate change over a period of time, it's going to have to be some, whether it's regulations or whatever, but they're going to, like, for example, the increased mileage of automobiles. I think, all the automobile makers recognize that needs to be done, but they want certainty. And so they're willing to say, yes, climate change is real. Yes, we need to have a better mileage, but we want to have it on a time frame that's realistic and that, again, gives us certainty. So you're seeing that in industries. And you're also seeing, I think, from the business standpoint, that particularly younger folks are saying, hey, what are you doing, business X, about it? If you're not, I'm not going to buy your soap, if business B over there is more sympathetic to sustainability. So they're recognizing that it's good for business. And so that helps us also to go to some of the Republicans and others that have been hard to bring along. So some of it, is language. My objective is getting something done, not embarrassing anyone, trying to find common denominators and moving forward. And so if we have to deal with the language, that's perfectly fine with me.
All right. Thank you, Congressman Gordon, for that. Harrison, you got any final thoughts?
I just actually had a little extra question because we interviewed Lincoln Davis not long ago, and we asked about his first congressional race when he ran against you in the primary, and he talked about the very cordial and mutually respectful relationship you guys developed later in Congress. So I was just wondering if you could tell us anything about your relationship with Lincoln Davis while you two served in Congress together.
Well, we had a great relationship. We had, our districts were next to each other. They were very similar. He was a hoot to be around. And so, we had fun, talking with each other. And we were, again, within the Democratic caucus. So, interestingly, I guess you might say that I was a big help in trying to, when redistricting time came, to help create a district that allowed Lincoln to run and to win. He was really a good public servant and someone who cared about his district. So it was fun being with Lincoln. So I have a question. Harrison,
Absolutely.
Where are you? When I say where is your background?
It's a place called Washington Rock. It's in my home county in New Jersey, in Somerset County. And it's basically, it's a big Revolutionary War overlook, and you can see the skyline of New York City from it.
Yeah. Have you been down to Lookout Mountain? It's sort of like Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga.
I did. I used to live in Tennessee, so we did a camping trip there when I was younger, because we lived there when I was.
I wouldn't say that Chattanooga is quite the same view as New York City, but still, it's
No, it's beautiful. I know what you mean. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Blast from the Past. We are honored to have former Tennessee Congressman Bart Gordon joining us. So thank you. Armin, anything else?
No, yeah. Once again, thank you very much, Congressman Gordon, for doing this.